Probably seen it if you caught the morning show earlier today, is our weather impact alert. That's going to be in place tonight, overnight into tomorrow morning. So the main window I'm looking at is 10 p.m. tonight all the way until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So this is a fairly slow moving weather system that we will have coming through. And the impact that we are looking at is the potential for a strong or a severe storm or two. Now there is a world and a scenario where we don't have anything in the way of severe weather pan out. However, we have some good guidance, and it does look like we have all the proper ingredients coming together to allow for this line to continue to hold its strength as we go into a cooler portion of the day. That would be the overnight time period into early tomorrow morning. So what you need to do over the next 24 to 36 hours, especially if you have any travel plans later tonight into very early tomorrow morning. I know lots of people may be heading way out of town, trying to catch a very early flight tomorrow at Hartsfield-Jackson, maybe waking up at say 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to make that 6 a.m. flight. This is a forecast that you are going to want to pay close attention to. And while you are driving, make sure that you drive slow through those batches of some heavier rain that really limit your visibility. I would advise trying to pull over under some form of covering if you are on the roads, or just adjusting your travel plans as needed. It's not going to be a widespread continuous line of heavy rain for the foreseeable future. It should be relatively thin in nature, but we'll go over which specific areas are going to see the heaviest impact at what time. And of course, stay updated with the weather team. If we are to get something in the form of some strong thunderstorms, of course, you can check in with my Facebook page. We'll be covering it on 13 WMAZ and 13 WMAZ Plus, especially if we are to get something in the way of a severe thunderstorm warning. So of course, we will be live streaming those throughout the entire duration of how long they do last. But it is something that Ben Jones and I are going to hand off in between the overnight hours. Ben will be staying a little bit later. I'll be coming in a little bit earlier just to make sure we have our bases covered if a possible severe warning is to come to fruition. So rain coming in tonight. In fact, we've already had some rain and still currently have some rain in the picture. We'll talk about which areas are seeing that. A storm or two going to be possible, and some of those could be on the strong to severe end of things, but mainly an isolated severe weather risk. We'll go over what that means. And then a cool down. That's going to begin on Wednesday. So as soon as tomorrow afternoon, we're going to start to feel some slight implications of that cool down. I really think it's going to be more so Wednesday night into Thursday morning that you're finally going to feel that cooler and drier air that you do have in the forecast. So this is supposed to be our Skycam graphic. Don't quite know what's going on with that, so maybe we're having some maintenance done on our Skycams right now. Not really much to tell. There are more clouds farther up to the north. We'll give you a better picture of what's going on the satellite and radar image. Temperature-wise, cooler up to the north, still in the mid-60s in areas like Thomaston, Forsyth, and Monticello. And we see a 68 in Eatonton, but then you transition more so into some low and mid-70s that are present across the rest of central Georgia. So you can kind of get an idea about which areas are a little bit cooler, and that is going to start to correlate to more cloud cover and maybe even some rain-cooled air that is currently in your forecast. But the warmest number we spot is a 76 across Warner Robins over into Cochran and maybe some other locations in central Georgia. So it's a nice and humid environment down here in the southeast United States. Actually a little bit cooler over in areas of Texas, but 79 degrees, the warmest number that we see in Orlando and all the way over to the west in Houston, Texas. Taking a look at your dew point temperatures, they've gotten a slight bump up since this morning, somewhere in the low 60s, right around the 60-degree mark. I do expect dew point temperatures to hover somewhere in the mid-60s, maybe even the upper 60s in a select few spots as we transition into that time frame overnight into the early morning hours directly ahead of the frontal boundary itself. So there's lots of moisture to work with down here in the south and the southeast. These wind arrows give us a good indication about where the actual frontal boundary it is, where it is located, and it's kind of where you start to see them clashing together. So the frontal boundary itself, it's way back over to the west in eastern Mississippi, getting into northwestern Alabama. There's a whole lot of moisture down there closer to the Gulf Coast in areas of southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, and getting into Louisiana and the panhandle of Florida. Wind-wise, we are starting to see a steady uptick in those winds, mainly coming out of the south still, so that's why we continue to get that steady uptick in the moisture content. But along with that, we also have some gusts already up to 20 miles per hour in Macon, 21 miles per hour down in Cordele, and then a 17 mile per hour gust in Warner Robins, 18 mile per hour gusts in Eastman. But the yellow shades, that's going to be where your gustier winds are. Those are mainly present farther over to the west. The closer and closer that you do get to the frontal boundary itself. Now taking a look at yesterday's numbers, 79 for a high temperature. It was already a pretty warm atmosphere yesterday, even felt the humidity in a tad bit of spots, but 44 was what we started out with in the morning. So right there close to average of your morning low of 41 degrees, where we should be this time of year, and your afternoon high temperature of 67 degrees. Yeah, definitely went up above and beyond that number by about 12 degrees as a matter of fact. Sorry, I had that frog in my throat right there. I was trying to hold it in. But it is going to be a warm day, and we are going to get plenty of breaks in the cloud cover. That's going to lead into a high temperature of 81 degrees. So right there on the cusp of the 80-degree mark and 15 degrees above average. So what is this frontal boundary going to interact with? It's going to interact with, number one, some unseasonably warm temperatures. Like you said, 66 degrees. That's our average high temperature. That's where we should be at this time of year. The 80s are definitely kind of atypical as we get into the late portion of November. And hour by hour, we just continue to warm up. I think we'll go a little bit above this meteogram just like we did yesterday, that 2, 3, and 4 o'clock window. But then your temperatures will begin to cool down. We'll start to see some upper 70s, some low 70s as we go into 6 p.m. And then I do believe we'll still drop down somewhere into the upper 60s before the front makes its entrance a little bit later on. But let's talk about the satellite and radar image, because it has been quite an active picture all morning long. This right up here in our northernmost counties, in Jasper County, up in Putnam, and portions of Hancock counties, you can actually see some pockets of some pretty steady and heavy rainfall at times, but it's all a part of this bowing segment that did move through northwest Georgia, moved into the metro Atlanta area, and is continuing to move over to the east into South Carolina. But the rest of central Georgia, you kind of draw a line from Thomaston over to Gray, all the way over to Sandersville. Areas farther down to the south, just dealing with some partly cloudy skies and a good amount of gaps in that cloud cover. So that's why we see warmer temperature values farther down to the south, and it is a little bit cooler farther up to the north because of the cloud cover blocking some sunshine and some of the rain-cooled air up in areas like Monticello, Eatonton, and getting close to Sparta. So this rain right now is fairly broken, and we have seen a steady weakening trend with this southern component of the bow. And when I say that bow, that essentially means some gusty winds that start to organize, and they continue to flare out ahead of the actual frontal boundary itself. That typically happens when a frontal boundary stalls or starts to slow down in motion. And that's exactly what's happened with this front so far. It's way back over to the west. It's kind of slowed down, but similar to when you're rolling a shopping cart and you let go, that shopping cart continues to roll for a little bit. That's what this bowing segment has done. So it continues its motion, even despite the main driving force and the main mechanism that is continuing to push this over to the east has stalled and has stopped way out behind it. This segment continues to go out way ahead of it. So kind of the first of many rounds of rain that northern Georgia is expected to see, but some of these rain showers have crept into central Georgia. Weren't quite forecasting this cluster to get this far south, but all in all, it's only impacting our fair share of about 3 counties, mainly up on the I-20 corridor. And if you are, say, maybe heading over towards Augusta for your Thanksgiving route out of town, that's where some heavier showers are going to exist, mainly around Lake Oconee, over to the east, just north of Warrenton, and as you continue farther over to the east. So right there in between Washington and Warrenton, Georgia, that's where we can find our heaviest rain on that current satellite and radar image. So here's a look at the big picture all across the southeast. Like we mentioned, that frontal boundary way back over here into Mississippi and into Alabama. So we do see our fair share of scattered showers, even a couple of storms around the Birmingham area that are out ahead of that actual main line of rain coming through. Well, the front is going to kick back into gear, and it's going to start to organize some rain chances in a very definitive line as we go into the nighttime hours. But let's go ahead and play out Future View to talk about this. Mostly clear at the 4 p.m. hour. So once again, that prime window of when we see our warmest temperatures here this time of year. We're going to have a steady breeze, warm temperatures, and that's going to continue to pull up some humidity from down to the south and the southwest. Then we start to see some scattered clouds get a little bit more widespread. But here's that main line that we are talking about. 10 p.m. is when it looks to start to make its entrance into northwest central Georgia. You can see some pockets of red, some pockets of orange, some pockets of yellows, and even some pockets of that dark red color. So with this latest run of Future View, I did take a look at it shortly before this stream. It does look like this frontal boundary and this line of rain is holding together a bit better than what we did see say as of the model run this morning, we could very well see this play out, and we could see our fair share of a couple severe thunderstorm warnings. This is what it's indicating right now. All in all, we still are forecasting an isolated risk for some severe weather, but we do have a pretty untapped environment here. Areas farther up to the north, they got their fair share of severe weather warnings already early this morning. The atmosphere is already worked over, so maybe the severe potential not as great up closer to the Atlanta area as opposed to down here where we haven't received rain in many areas. So this timing, once again, 10 p.m. starting to move in, and then closer to midnight, we'll start to see it creep towards Macon as we go into around maybe a little bit before this. I would think maybe around 3 a.m., 2 a.m., we'll start to see it move farther and farther down to the southeast. And then eventually by around 7 a.m., we do see this line starting to break apart. So starting to become more so just a broken line of some showers, some pockets of heavy rain, some isolated potential for still some strong to maybe even severe weather. But as we go to 9 a.m., rain is almost completely out of the picture. Still have a bit of residual cloud cover on the backside of the front. And then it is just going to be a pattern of some high-level cloud cover and some breezy conditions as we go into the second half of your Wednesday. So I would advise trying to cater your travel plans to say maybe a little bit later in the day as we go into the second half of Wednesday or just the late morning time frame. Like I mentioned, 9 a.m. it looks like most of the active weather is out of the picture already. Still a couple of showers in our southeasternmost counties, but it's not going to be anything that really poses a drastic impact to your travel plans. Then we transition into Thanksgiving morning. Does look like we have some passing clouds for the morning hours, but then after that, crystal clear and a little bit breezy. So you may want to take that into account, especially if you have any plans to grill out or deep fry that turkey. Things could get out of hand if you do have some gusty winds present, but right now it looks like the winds start to subside as we head into Thanksgiving evening and eventually transition into Black Friday on 1 a.m. on Friday, that is. So day one storm outlook. We were talking about this yesterday with the day two outlook. We've just seen it shift to the day one outlook. And I know this is outlined for Tuesday, but we have to go all the way back to our severe weather season in the spring to kind of reference something that I'm going to talk about. These severe weather outlooks, they go from 8 a.m. the day of all the way until 8 a.m. the next day. So this outlook goes all the way until 8 a.m. tomorrow, hence why you do see areas here in central Georgia outlined in this day one storm outlook for Tuesday. It goes into the overnight hours and into very early on Wednesday morning. But notice the weakening trend that you see. Back over here behind the potential threats box, shades of yellow that are going to indicate a level 2 out of 5 risk for some strong to severe weather. Much greater potential for some severe weather back over to the west, areas that have already seen some severe weather this morning. But as that line progresses farther to the east and the southeast, it does look like the severe risk goes down, and eventually there is none in areas like Wrightsville, Dublin, Eastman, all the way down to McRae. This doesn't mean that you guys are going to dodge the severe weather or anything in the way of some strong thunderstorms completely. It does just mean that the confidence decreases the farther and farther southeast that you go, because the system will be moving through during the overnight hours. The only reason it's going to hold together for a little bit longer into those nighttime hours is because we are going ahead and getting the atmosphere ready with warm temperatures, an increase in humidity. But as we steadily progress into those overnight hours, the temperatures are going to be at their coolest. You're not going to have any daytime heating, so that front will eventually weaken by the time we get into the early morning hours closer to sunrise tomorrow. But the main potential threats that we're looking at, a strong to maybe even severe storm or two. I said 1 or 2 just to kind of cover the bases and really emphasize the isolated risk with that. So isolated means it's only going to happen in a select few areas. It's not looking to be widespread, not a continuous line of severe thunderstorm warnings. This latest run of Future View seems to be hinting at more potential for maybe more than just a storm or two that could be on the stronger to severe side. However, that's just what one model run does say. A lot of the guidance that we've seen over the last 24 hours has said that this line is going to break apart a little bit earlier than indicated by that last graph model run. Gusty winds and small hail are looking like the main impact. So when I say gusty winds, within something in the way of a strong to severe thunderstorm, and when I say strong thunderstorm, I also mean those special weather statements. So a thunderstorm that is on the stronger side, but not quite reaching the parameters for a severe thunderstorm warning. 40 to 60 mile per hour gusts, they can be present in a select few isolated areas. And along with that, within the core of heaviest rainfall, we could have the potential for some small hail, looking about quarter-size hail or less in diameter. So It's not looking to be major, and hopefully it's something that you won't be outside for whatsoever. But those things combined with some heavy rain limiting your visibility and, of course, rumbles of thunder that could be really close. All in all, it just makes for a bad recipe to be on the roads. And we do have a potential threat that I didn't necessarily outline. It is very low, and it's more so with some of those cells that are ahead of the main line of storms moving through our area. And it doesn't look like many of those are going to pop up whatsoever. There is a non-zero risk for maybe a spin-up tornado, but I think that risk is far greater to the northwest and over to the west of us, areas that have more confidence in that severe weather and areas that are also going to get some of those cells that are ahead of the main line. But it's something we'll, of course, be on the lookout for. Like I told you, we're going to be staffed overnight. If anything pops up in the way of a severe warning, you can tune into 13 WMAZ Plus, or we'll very likely be on air given that it's the overnight hours, and we will be bringing you all the latest information that you need to know. But how about some rain? Because I have mentioned it over the last couple of days. Sometimes the trade-off that we're going to need when you're in a very dry stretch like we have been as of recently, you are going to have to get some thunderstorms, because associated with thunderstorms are going to be your heavier rainfall rates. Now, we do have an excessive rainfall outlook for northwest Georgia, a marginal risk at that. So kind of take those severe levels that we were just talking about. We have a 1 through 4 scale up here on the excessive rainfall outlook, just running the risk of maybe some isolated flash flooding in a select few areas. So once again, that isolated term does mean it's not going to happen everywhere. It may happen on one end of the county, but not happen whatsoever on the other end of the county. This just means that some areas they get more impressive rainfall totals, so some thunderstorms that train over the same areas over and over throughout the course of today and into tomorrow. Could have maybe some ponding of some water. You could also have some very well saturated soil, and obviously it's been a very dry stretch, so the soil is pretty loose in nature. We'll talk about the risk of maybe possible down trees that could knock down power lines as well. And then we also are looking at areas that maybe don't necessarily drain too well. So you're looking at some of those areas that maybe have some clogged drains, maybe some of the leaf fall from all the fall foliage has clogged up the drains. The water can't go down and flow like it normally should. You can see the ponding of water in those select few areas, or maybe just areas in general that don't drain too well. You kind of have a hilly landscape wherever your property is, maybe in between hills you have a little bit of a valley. That's obviously going to puddle up quicker than, say, it would on top of the hills, because when the rain hits the top of the hill, gravity is going to force it down, and of course it's going to go train into those valleys. So be on the lookout for that, but obviously not too much of a risk here in central Georgia. We will continue to keep you posted if we see anything in the way of a flash flood warning, but I do expect it to be mainly isolated up in areas of northwest Georgia, and we very well cannot even see any of those flash flood warnings. So that's going to be valid through the rest of today. But let's talk about those rainfall totals. According to this latest run of Future View, once again, it continues to say the same story over to the west and the northwest. There will be some higher rainfall totals. If you live farther to the east and the southeast, not going to luck out with as much rain. Now, this latest run of Future View does have everyone receiving some form of rain, whether it's only a couple hundredths of an inch in areas like Sparta, it's a couple tenths of an inch, maybe closer to a ½ inch of rain in areas like Wrightsville and Irwinton. But the select few areas, they get very, very lucky with maybe something in the way of a strong or a severe thunderstorm, have the potential for isolated amounts of rain, 1 to 2 inches. So if we can get that to come to fruition in more widespread areas, yes, of course, it's going to be a bit more of an active overnight period into early tomorrow morning, but that would do a good job at bringing us alleviation to some of the dry and drought conditions that have settled in. However, that won't be reciprocated on our drought monitor we get on Thanksgiving morning. It will be reciprocated as of next week, because we take all the data through today, and this will be coming through in that period just after when we take all the data from. So we won't see it reciprocated on the drought monitor this week. Nothing to get your hopes up about, say, Thanksgiving morning, if you are very eager to look at the latest release of the drought monitor, but we will keep you posted with the next update that we do get on next Thursday. But all in all, I do expect many of your rainfall totals to be below the inch mark. Some select areas, those isolated areas, will get heavier rainfall amounts, 1 to 2 inches, and hopefully have more alleviation, maybe even the improvement of a couple of drought conditions. In terms of the breeze, this is what it currently looks like here at the 11 a.m. hour. We start to see that yellow color creep farther over to the east, and we are looking at maybe some gusts up to 20 to 25 miles per hour throughout the rest of today, mainly coming out of that south and southwesterly direction. And as we go overnight, isolated pockets are going to maybe pop up some of those red colors. So where you can get the gusts from 40 to 60 miles per hour, but it doesn't look like those are widespread by any means. And it really doesn't look like we have anything too substantial in the way of widespread gusty winds as this front makes its way through. It's really after the fact that the front passes through. So Wednesday afternoon, still having the potential for some gusts up to 20, 25 miles per hour. And that also will be possible throughout your Thanksgiving afternoon. So remember what I was saying, if you're firing up the grill, maybe deep frying the turkey, just be very cautious, because if there is anything in the way of a fire to start, it could spread pretty rapidly, but hopefully we don't have as much dry vegetation after this rainmaker as opposed to what we would have had, say, a week ago in time. And then that takes us all the way into Black Friday once again. In terms of the humidity, I would buy the severe weather risk a little bit more and buy it to be a little bit more widespread. If we could get some of those areas of dark green over to the west and southwest to creep into central Georgia, not completely ruling out that possibility whatsoever, because we have seen those areas present on the current dew point temperatures map that we took a look at the beginning of this stream. However, it does look like this latest model run isn't really hinting at an influx of those dark green colors. So not going to be super swampy, but there is going to be enough moisture to work with for some widespread rain chances, whether that's a light shower, whether that's a steady shower, or whether that's something in the way of thunderstorms still remains to be seen. But I think the more active weather risk still going to be over to the west and up to the northwest. Then after the passage of that front, no shades of green whatsoever. It is a very dry environment where we could see dew point temperatures get as low as the upper teens. So quite busy over the next 3 days, to say the very least. Tuesday into Wednesday. Don't know why the Veterans Day icon has popped up right over here, but there's a 20% under that. And with under that 20%, you do see the night written there. So of course, we do have the potential for some showers and storms starting as early as tonight, but your weather impact alert really spans mostly into tomorrow. So that's where we are going to see the best coverage of rain after we get past the midnight hour tonight. And then after the passage of our front, slightly cooler, 74 degrees for a high temperature Wednesday afternoon. The cooler air starts to move in, so we aren't going to see a warm up like we would see today in light of the mostly sunny skies this afternoon, up around the 80 degree mark. But then I think when you start to really notice some of that cooler and drier air is going to be Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, 36 degrees for a morning low temperature on Thanksgiving Day. You see the thunderstorm icon. I just forgot to shift all those over to the left one box, but 58 degrees also for a high temperature. It is going to be a bit of a chilly day. But circling back to this weather impact alert, the main reason that we are doing this is number one, because of the Thanksgiving travel forecast. Expecting a heavy amount of traffic starting within about the next hour, right at the noon hour, today and tomorrow. So of course, most people are heading out of town today and tomorrow. Going to be a high volume of traffic on the roads. And you are going to have people that are traveling at, say, some abnormal times of the day. I know some of you do have an early wake-up call for your jobs, and maybe you would be up and out on the road, say, around 5 a.m. But think about people that are going up to Hartsfield-Jackson, that are flying out of Atlanta. And of course, if you have a 6 a.m. flight, you know you need to wake up very early down here in central Georgia in order to make that flight, especially with the amount of people that will be at the airport tomorrow. So that's why we do have that weather impact alert, because it is going to pertain to a lot of people's travel forecasts. Typically on a normal week-to-week basis, if it was just a normal work week with the isolated severe weather chance, we'd be here and we'd be ready to go if there was anything to pop up in the way of severe weather. However, it wouldn't look to be widespread, and it really wouldn't look to have too many impacts on your day-to-day routine, with it being an overnight into early morning severe weather chance. But then the traffic goes down for Thursday and Friday. Weather obviously going to be cooperative. But note this, Sunday, we also are expecting heavy traffic. Think about all the people that are traveling Tuesday and Wednesday. Everyone's got to come back home at some point. So everyone, all the people traveling on Tuesday and Wednesday will be coming back on Sunday. It is forecasted to be one of the worst travel days that we see in the entire calendar year. And at that, it could look to be a bit of a messy one. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. Humidity day by day, it gets a downtick after the front goes through, then we start to see a steady uptick as we go into Sunday. You can kind of hint what I'm throwing down right there. Obviously, when you get an uptick in the humidity, the rain chances do go back up. But let's talk about some of the numbers. 36 on Thanksgiving morning, 30 on Friday morning, and then 29 forecasted to be the lowest temperature that we see on Saturday morning. Afternoon high temperatures are also going to be on the chillier side. 58 on Thursday, 56 on Friday, before 57 on Saturday. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, yes, they are going to be cooler, but it's going to be a forecast that you need to bundle up for. Now we take it to the long-range models. Still staying dry on Friday. We start to see an increase in cloud cover, and that'll stick around for Saturday, but it still looks good for, say, football Friday night games. Third round of the GHSA playoffs will be taking place on Friday. Saturday, rivalry day for college football. Forecast still looks good down here, but then here comes another rainmaker. And not only does this look to bring us some rain maybe as early as the afternoon hours on Sunday, so the earlier the better if you can make plans to head back home, say maybe on Saturday or very early in the morning on Sunday, because this rain chance does look to continue to be pretty widespread as we go into Sunday evening. And then at that, we get a brief break as we go into Monday morning, maybe still a few spotty showers here and there, but this could be a similar setup to a multi-day rain event. Now, this would be just what the doctor ordered in terms of getting us out of those drought conditions that have settled in. But if we are to see kind of this continuation of rain, this fetch of moisture coming up from the southwest up to the northeast, we're going to need a number of things to come together. But it is worth noting that there is a relatively good amount of agreement right now amongst these long-range models. Then I think as we go into the midweek next week, after we cross into the 1st of December, that's when we will begin to clear out once again. So one last time, weather impact alert. That's going to be for tonight into the overnight hours and early tomorrow morning. 10 p.m. tonight into 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's kind of the sweet spot. That's the time window I want you to pay attention to. I want you to check the radar. I want you to check in with us if we do have anything in the way of a severe thunderstorm warning, because we do have the potential of that in isolated spots, but not necessarily widespread. If it is to turn into a widespread event, then of course we'll be keeping you covered, and everything that you need to know, we will be covering it here on the weather team if we are to say, maybe see a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings at the same time. So stay updated with the weather team. Stay updated on your own, whether that's utilizing a radar app that you have on your phone. We do find those very handy to use here on the weather team. Ben and myself will probably be doing a little bit of dual coverage with our satellite and radar and what we do see on our phones, because sometimes we can see it a little bit better on our phones than, say, we could with our graphics. Make sure that you're driving slow if you do encounter patches of heavy rain, and pull over under some covering if you are to run across a thunderstorm in nature that limits your visibility. It's not going to be for a prolonged period of time. You just have to get that leading edge, that leading band of heaviest rain out of the picture, which will last probably about 15 to 20 minutes. Then the rain will ease up a tad bit, but there will still be your fair share of steady showers on the backside of a front. So 7-day forecast, it is eventful really over the next 3 days, but once we settle into Thanksgiving, going into Black Friday, and going into Rivalry Saturday, it is looking like it's going to be a much more appropriate feeling forecast for the back half of November, instead of these well above average temperatures we've been talking about for what seems like 2 weeks straight now. We really have to go back into a cold spell at the beginning of last week for the last time we actually felt some cool air, but we will steadily warm up, get an increase in moisture, and it does look like more rain chances are on the horizon for Sunday, the second half of Sunday, mainly after lunchtime, and they could continue into Monday and next Tuesday before finally getting out of the picture. But we'll worry about that once we get there. My motto and my saying is always, we'll cross that bridge once we do get there. The main concern right now is that weather impact alert. Be cautious on the roads and adjust your travel plans accordingly if you do have them, specifically early tomorrow morning, or if you have any travel plans that are, say, going to be later tonight, trying to knock out half of the trip tonight and maybe do the rest of the trip early tomorrow morning. And if you are traveling this afternoon, so sometime just past lunchtime, if you are going up to the north, you're going over to the west, it is going to be a bit more of an active picture. So make sure that you're keeping a close eye on the skies, close eye on that satellite and radar image, and make sure that you're not trying to drive through some really heavy batches of rain that can really limit visibility and make things a lot sketchier on the road. So that will do it for your extended forecast for today. It was a lot of weather impact talk. Tomorrow around 11 a.m., we should be in the all clear, and I'll be talking about a much more tame and a much more fun forecast for your Thanksgiving and the weekend after. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m.